live on Nisim 95.9 and 100.1 in Bogotanga and Tamale respectively. Also live on our social media handles on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is ETV Ghana. On Fact Sheet, we say it as it is without mincing words. And tonight we're talking about a very, very important conversation which has to do with an essential tool that all of us have become so acclimatized to and so accustomed to when it comes to communication in our day-to-day activities. We're talking about your mobile phones and the SIM cards that are within them. You remember just a few weeks ago, the NCA gave the instruction to Ghanaians that by the end of September, if you had not registered your SIM card through the SIM card re-registration exercise, they were certainly going to take you off their system. And they had indicated that within the month they were going to take punitive actions to those who have still not registered their SIM cards, and that these actions could mean being taken off the system for 24 hours or 48 hours. For some of us, we patiently waited and did the needful by registering our SIM card. For those who had not, last week, they got a hint of what was going to happen to them because the NCA implemented this order by instructing the telcos to implement these punitive sanctions. So some people were taken off for some 48 hours, some people 24 hours. But this was not only individuals whose SIM cards had not been registered. Now, these were not people who had not registered. These were people whose SIM cards had been registered already. And so question many are asking themselves is, how is it that these telcos who are supposed to have access and information, our database, our biometric information, are not able to determine those who have registered and those who are not registered, and that if they are implementing these punitive sanctions, those who have registered got affected. And so questions are being asked as to how the system is running and how we can protect the database which has been collected. Remember that earlier position of government was that all registrations which require some data or identification should be by the use of the ID card, which is the national one, which the NIA is providing. But we all know that the NIA has told us that they've been able to register some 17 million Ghanaians. And of these 17 million Ghanaians, they've been able to issue some 60 million of these cards. But of these 60 million cards that we are referencing, only about 1 million have not gone for their SIM cards. And so many have been queuing, seeking to get their SIM cards. So question many are asking is, why is it that the primary tool of identification, which will guarantee the registration of these cards, have not been completed, and yet the NCA, the Ministry of Communication, are forcefully asking Ghanaians to comply with this order? The minority in Parliament have also expressed their displeasure at this order by the NCA and the Ministry of Communications, and they have said that this action is illegal, and so they are going to fight this. They are also raising concerns about the self-serving application, which Ghanaians are supposed to pay some 5 Ghana cedis before they can use the service to register their SIM cards. These are issues that we'll be concerning ourselves with tonight on Fact Sheet, even as we interrogate the issues therein. My name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to the conversation tonight. And whilst I'm welcoming you to the conversation, I want you to check some data which I'm sharing with you, because this data is very important. And also, just give you a hint of the issues that the minority in their press conference which they held today, some of the issues they raised therein, and then we can come back and have the conversation. And so let's go take a listen to what the minority in Parliament, the concerns they raised, and then we can come back to start the conversation.
It appears that the success of the communication sector is haunting this government, and members of government are not even placing value on its threat to our democracy and endeavoring to emasculate networks to intimidate subscribers whose freedoms are regularly subjected to database manipulations. Instead of promoting the widespread use of communication services, what is obtaining now is an unnecessary request for registration, re-registration, multiple registration of SIMs for contrived reasons And I emphasize that registration, re-registration, then we end up with a blockade. They are simply punishing Ghanaians over their own failures and inability to synchronize data between the National Identification Authority and mobile operators in Ghana. That punishment on the Ghanaian citizen remains unjustified, and we in the minority will not sit aloof on the matter.
To Fact Sheets Live on ETV Live on Happy 98.9 FM, Nisim 95.9 and 100.1. So we're talking about your SIM cards. As earlier I indicated to you, my name is Samuel Ishem and my guests are online for us to begin the conversation. Tonight I'm joined on the line via Zoom by Mr. James Anane Amezi, who is Assistant Registrar, ICT, Central University, Accra, and also Mr. Maximus Ametogo, who is a Digital Marketing Strategist. We'll also be joined via Zoom by Rasmus Barak, who is a former Member of Parliament for Kumbungu constituency and who has been championing when it comes to this whole conversation about SIM cards and then the re-registration. Gentlemen, good evening, and thanks so much for joining me tonight. Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, thank
Good
you
evening,
for
Maximus,
having
if you
me.
can hear me. All right, so
Thank you very much for
if
having
my
me.
guests
And
could
again,
just
good evening to
unmute their
your
microphone so
listeners.
we can begin the conversation and then set the ball rolling. It's good to have you on the show tonight, sir.
Thank you very much for having me and good evening to your listeners across Ghana.
All right, so let's delve deeper into the issues now. The actions by the NCA calling on the telcos to block the SIM cards of people for 48 hours. From your point of view, what was your reaction when you got the feedback on social media?
Mixed reactions. Mixed reactions because if we look at a historical overview of this whole SIM card registration issue, we realize registering phone numbers is not new. Back in the days of PNT, phone numbers were registered. There was what was called a telephone directory, where you go to post offices and every telephone subscriber, you have one. It's a big book with all your details, your house number, your phone number, your name, everything registered and in that book. And every year, the Post and Telecommunication Corporation updates that record and gives all telephone subscribers copies. So you see, registering telephone numbers is not new. And picking subscribers' data and linking it with their telephone numbers is not new. It's something that has been there and in all countries. But the issue we have now is slightly an aspect. You have two very important processes going on side by side, where one depends on the other. Ideally, we could have waited for one of the processes to complete first, and then we use that as an input for the other. Since the SIM card registration or the linking it to your biodata is based on the availability of your Ghana card, we could have waited as a country to be sure of, if not every Ghanaian, at least as many Ghanaians as possible to be covered by the Ghana card before we.
All right, so it looks like we're having a little challenge with our network tonight, but we'll try and then make do with it and then have the conversation. But if you just join us, you're welcome to Fact Sheet. Tonight we're talking about your SIM cards and the NCA's punitive actions is taken against individuals whose SIM cards have not been registered. Remember, they were supposed to be taken off some 24 hours, some 48 hours, and people whose SIM cards have been registered got affected over the weekend when these sanctions came on stream. Let's pick some reactions from Ras Mubarak as to what he makes of the actions by the NCA and the Ministry of Communications for that matter, seeing that they are the umbrella ministry. Ras, good evening and thanks so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm hoping you're doing well.
Well, tired. I got back to Ghana from New York this afternoon, so it's been a 10-hour flight. So you can imagine.
Your former colleagues in Parliament are agitating against the actions of the NCA and the Ministry of Communication. They are saying that it's an illegal move by the NCA and the Ministry of Communications, and so they are going to fight it. Now, do you support your colleagues? If you do, what are your reasons for going against it?
Well, to begin with, the action from the minority is long overdue. I mean, they should have been up in arms, fighting against this from a very long time, from the very beginning that the NCA, started, the NCA and Ministry of Communications started these moves to violate the rights of Ghanaians. What the Ministry of Communication is doing is completely illegal. It is unconstitutional. It has no basis, and it's a gross disrespect for people's constitutional rights, to have uninterrupted communication. I'll repeat what my group have said consistently all this while, that the directive by the NCA and the Ministry of Communications for people to re-register their SIM cards is not backed by law. The law says register your SIM card. The law does not say re-register your SIM card. So if you need for people to re-register their SIM cards, you would have to go to Parliament and get the appropriate legislation. And that is the reason why I have decided that I would not do it. Because I don't see why I have already registered my SIM card many years ago in compliance with the law, and then I'm being asked to go and queue and get my SIM card registered, especially in a manner that is so chaotic, that is so disrespectful, as if Ghanaians don't have anything to do. They should just wake up and go and queue, at telecommunication network offices all day, on end. So we feel that it was not done in a humane manner. So we called for them to, amongst other things, go to Parliament, but also have a mobile application where people can actually do this properly from the comfort of their homes. But even with that, it is more chaotic. The minister failed to meet her own deadlines. That aside, the minister has not told you, she hasn't told the Ghanaian people how much the mobile app is costing us, if any. She hasn't told us how they awarded the processes, they awarded the contract for the SIM, the mobile app to be developed. Because it has to meet procurement standards. It has to meet, good governance barometer. It has to be measured by certain well-known, well-established standards. She to do all of that. She's taking 5 CDs for the mobile app thing, and that again is illegal because she hasn't gone back to Parliament to seek approval from Parliament. It is only Parliament that approves fees and charges. It is only the Parliament of the Republic of Ghana that approves fees and charges, for public institutions. She hasn't done all of this, and then on top of the mess, on top of the violation of the Constitution, on top of the disrespect, on top of the corrupt activity, you go ahead and begin to block people's, telephone lines in the name of establishing punitive measures.
All right.
I am of the humble opinion that it is the docility of a section of the Ghanaian public, that it is the unwillingness of a section of the Ghanaian public to assert their democratic rights that has resulted in the minister and the NCA and the rest of them misbehaving in the manner that they are doing. They are violating people's constitution,
Ras, if you are
constitutional rights.
if you are that concerned about these actions by the minister and the NCA for that matter, seeing that, for instance, the minority leader is a lawyer, you have several NDC members of parliament who are lawyers, several members of your party who are lawyers, would it not therefore have been right if by now we would have seen this matter in court?
So the matter has been in the human rights courts. I'm surprised you haven't been following that, and the judgment from the human rights court is very bizarre, to say the least. Very, very bizarre, to say the least, and I'm not surprised that, things had turned out the way they had turned out in the human rights court, but there are several avenues legally to drum home people's unhappiness about the processes. And one of the avenues is civil disobedience. One of the avenues is boycotts and mass protests. Earlier on, you remember, we had called for, no calls day, boycotts of certain services. We may have to revisit that. We may have to mass up in the streets to express our unhappiness, our disaffection,
Ras,
by the manner in which people's constitutional rights are being violated.
If I may, I think I know where you're referencing the case of the lawyer who took the matter to court, the initial stages when the re-registration exercise had started and the ruling that came. Now, the point I was making has to do with your concern about the fees and charges that are being charged for this application. The issue has to do with the legality of the process itself, seeing that now 2 biostats are being collected, that of the NIA and then the one that is being collected by the telcos. That's my point I'm making when it comes to the courts that I was referencing, not the initial court case.
All right. Okay, all right. But that notwithstanding, there are a lot of avenues open to the Ghanaian public. And one of them is civil disobedience, mass protests, boycotts, to drum home our unhappiness about this criminality. I call it criminality. Because the processes for awarding the contract did not go through procurement processes. If it has, the minister should make it public. She should make it public. The newspapers which had advertised for people to bid for the contract to be awarded to them. You sit in your small corner, literally, award a contract to your cronies. You are not being accountable to the good people of Ghana. You are disrespecting them, talking down on the people, speaking in a very condescending manner. And on top of that, you violate their constitutional rights to have, unfettered access to telecommunication.
But Ras, one would have thought that seeing that we have Parliament as it stands now, a hung Parliament, the minority would take advantage of that and then address this issue even in Parliament to ensure the minister comes to answer these questions as to where the charges and fees are coming from.
Well, I don't know if you still have faith in Parliament's ability to assert its oversight responsibility, but I have lost that faith.
Really?
In Parliament's ability, to rein in on ministers like Esla Ozu, I've lost that faith. The writings had been on the wall for quite a while. You've seen the inertia, that had come out of Parliament, as if they want to support the processes, as if they are angry about it, as if they are not angry about it, If you are opposing something, you need to make your point very clear from day one and be consistent, and stand with the people, because this is a people's fight. This is not a partisan fight. People's constitutional rights are being violated. As a matter of fact, I'm told that people who had even registered and gone through the processes have had their SIM cards blocked, for some time. I mean, this shouldn't be happening in a democracy. And we shouldn't be putting up with all of this. So I would call on well-meaning Ghanaians. And you see, you shouldn't be affected to be able to stand up for your friends who are affected. Because it may be your friend or your colleague or your family member today. Tomorrow it could be you. And that is why I insist on mass protest. I insist on civil disobedience. I insist on people asserting their civic responsibility. These things have gone on for far too long. The institutions that are clothed with the constitutional powers, to rein in on some of these overreach. The courts, parliament, they are letting down the people. So the people, the masses, they have enormous powers, immeasurable, amount of power, to actually go out there, protest, however long it will take, to get the right things done. We've seen this happen in France, where people were so unhappy. The Yellow Vest protest, I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah.
Rain or shine, in snow, people were out there fighting for their rights. I mean, this Ghanaian culture of turning the other cheek would almost always lead governments into treating the people with disrespect and disdain. And that's exactly what you see in today.
Interesting point about your disappointment in your former colleagues in Parliament. But what necessarily gives you this, assessment that you have of them, that either they are in support or they are not in support? Are they not vocal enough, some of your colleagues, when it comes to this matter?
Well, so it is not about the minority. It is about Parliament as an institution, minority or majority, standing with the people. Who are the people affected? It is the constituents of people in Parliament, whether NDC or MPP. Everyone, one way or the other, has been affected. People have been affected. People's businesses have been affected. People's livelihood has been affected. So it should not be looked at in a partisan, from within the prisms of a partisan lens. And to be honest with you, this may be a conversation for another day. But our constitution certainly does not do us good with this majority of ministers coming from Parliament. Because you know what that does? It stops people from the ruling government who genuinely could have been opposing certain things, keeping quiet because they are either ministers, deputies, or expecting that in a future reshuffle, they would make it in government, and for which reason they don't want to rock the boat. So almost every now and then you have one side of the divide literally opposing things that don't sit well with the public. And that certainly is not healthy for our democracy. Parliament should have the oversight, and Parliament is clothed with enough powers, as a matter of fact, to perform that oversight responsibility. Unfortunately, even with an nearly even number in Parliament, you're not seeing that fight. You're not seeing that struggle for the best interests of the Ghanaian public. It must not take, civil society groups to make these points louder before Parliament gets on board. I mean, these issues have been, in the public for quite a while. And you would expect that before Parliament even went on recess, the minister would have been summoned. Parliament has the powers to censure her, to introduce, certain measures that would clip her wings as a minister. Has Parliament taken advantage of all of those avenues? How many questions have been filed in Parliament, in opposition to this level of egregious violations of people's rights?
All right. Now, let's end our conversation with a very interesting aspect of this whole issue we are discussing, and that has to do with the commerce or the business aspect of all this. Now, the telcos are the center of this, and if you remember, just a few months ago, Airtel Tigo became a Ghanaian, wholly Ghanaian-owned company. Vodafone had given indication that they wanted to offload. But for the actions of the NCA, I'm sure by now talks would have gone on and maybe Vodafone would have offloaded. Now, with MTN being at the center of all this, let's say 48 hours of taking 1 million Ghanaians off the system, it's got implications for their businesses they are doing. Has this the potential to affect us in terms of investors coming into the system when it comes to our telecom industry?
Well, clearly, the message it sends out there is that there's some level of lawlessness. You know, you have more than 1 million Ghanaians who have been affected. If I'm a business investor, I'm thinking about class action lawsuits. And as a matter of fact, you know, just for the record, you know, I've put my name up, you know, as one of those who would be initiating a class action lawsuit against the Ministry of Communication, against the NCA and all the parties, because I have a contract with MTN. I don't have a contract with anybody else. So if I can't have access to make phone calls, if my lines have been blocked, you know, it is MTN certainly would be one of those I'll be coming after. You know, so these are things that would be on the back of the minds of investors. And I'm even saying that, look, whatever class action lawsuit we would be taking should not only be in Ghana, because clearly the courts in Ghana are losing their credibility. Okay, do a vox pop today, and you would see the responses of people, you know, about the judiciary in our country. It shouldn't be so, but that is a reality. People have lost confidence, and it's not just the judiciary, but Parliament as an institution and the executive as well. You know, so for any investor, they're thinking about lawsuits that could result in the award of millions of dollars worth of damages to, you know, customers who have been affected. Do I want to really, you know, put my company through that? Certainly, you know, for a clever investor, certainly the answer would be no. And I'm not surprised, you know, Vodafone wants out. You know, the climate is really not conducive, you know, for business. Cost of doing business is also going up. So all of these factors culminate in people losing confidence in the atmosphere, in the, you know, sphere within which businesses ought to be thriving. You know, so to answer your question, people are being affected, people's businesses, and it's not just these multinational companies, but it's also individuals. It's the young man who's just started his business and had to communicate with a truck driver to bring certain goods somewhere, only to realize that he can't even reach the truck driver because the truck driver's, you know, numbers have been blocked. It is that young lady in Asesewa or in Kumbungu in my constituency or in Dangbe district who started a small business only to realize that, you know, her daily revenues is being affected largely.
All right.
And we are not talking about a country that, you know, provides a lot of incentives for young people. You know, this is a country where people struggle to start their own businesses.
All right.
You know, and if you've struggled to start your own business, you don't want to see it get collapsed by people's refusal to listen to reason, by people's renewed sense of, you know, constitutional violation. That is what is happening. That is what the minister has done to violate people's constitutional rights.
I would thank you for your thoughts you shared with us this evening on Fact Sheet. He's the former member of Parliament for Kumbungu constituency, key advocate when it comes to these protests against the SIM card re-registration exercise. But let's just go back to the Zoom conversation. I believe that the lines are a bit restored now, and so we can continue the conversation. But let's talk about fidelity issues. The data that is being collected by these telcos, how can we ensure that it's in safe hands? Remember, one of the fundamental reasons for which we are doing this SIM card re-registration exercise has to do with the usual complaints about how scammers have been calling people and taking their money and all of that. Does this solve the problem when it comes to data protection issues? James, if you can hear me, data issues, seeing that we have one set of data with the National Identification Authority and then another set which is being collected by the telcos. How safe is that data which is being collected?
These are issues that we really need to address because I believe the NIA, the National Identification Authority, I believe and I know they must have serious programmers and database experts to do such things. You see, there's a danger in collecting people's data. You really need to put mechanisms in place to identify who is authorized to access the data. And then when people access the data, what they can do. It is not just everybody who accesses data that can do or should be able to do everything with the data. So you should segment the people who can access the data. When they access it, what can they do with the data? We have four basic issues you do with data. You either create a data, you read it, you update it, or you delete it. You can segment those who are authorized to access the data such that somebody can see the data, but he can't make any changes. Somebody can see the data and make changes. Somebody can add to it. Somebody can remove from it. So all these are mechanisms that you put in place to protect the data. Without these mechanisms, it's a very dangerous thing. Now, for me, my thinking was we would have finished with the identification card processes, the Ghana card processes, and then use that as a basis to register the SIM cards. But today, both processes are ongoing. So I want to come back to the issue of punitive actions. I think the government should look at these punitive actions again, because it will be very sad for me, who genuinely want to register or link my phone number to my Ghana card, but I don't have a Ghana card, and I've been trying everything possible to get the Ghana card, and I'm not getting it, and then you punish me for that. It's a bit problematic. And then to answer your question directly about the duplication of data, you have the telcos having a set of data, you have the Identification Authority having a set of data. I think the telcos do not necessarily have to have our data.
Okay.
Our data should be with the Identification Authority, so that if we want to register I'll link the two together, all we need is the Ghana card number, which will then be used to link to all our data with the National Identification Authority. But for the two entities to take duplicate sets of data is a bit problematic. I think that one too should be looked at.
Okay.
To forestall our private data, our personal data falling into wrong hands.
Now, the point about the registration exercise, if, for instance, the NIA tells us that they have gotten some 17 million plus Ghanaians who are in their system to have registered, and yet of this, some 60 million of these cards have been issued, and of these 60 million cards which have been issued, about 1 million of these individuals have not gone to collect their cards. And again, we all see how numbers swell up at the various telcos, offices when there's a deadline approaches. Should this not be a reason for us to be concerned about the attitude of Ghanaians towards such exercises, and therefore the actions of the ministry being fair?
No, I don't believe the ministry is being fair over here. You cannot say that because there are uncollected cards at the National Identification Authority, then it means these people, they are deliberately not going for the card. No, there could be various reasons why people have not gotten for their cards or uncollected cards. Somebody, it's unfortunate, but that is the reality of life. Somebody could go to the National Identification Office, do everything, then you ask him to come next week. but unfortunately, he may not reach home and die. Such card will never be collected. Somebody, you ask him to come next week, but due to whatever reason, the 3 days time, he's traveled out of the country. Until he comes, that card will not be collected. So I don't think it is an issue of Ghanaians deliberately, intentionally, not going for their cards. No, there could be various reasons. And the fact that there are uncollected cards does not mean it is intentional. And
But
because
how
of that,
about the
you punish
numbers
those
that
who
swell
are
up
not.
at the various, points of registration at the various, telcos when, let's say, a deadline is approaching? For instance, we know that this latest deadline is that of ending of September. By the latter part of September, we would see the numbers that would be there at the various telcos with NIA cards to go and register.
Yes, it is possible, but still, there could be genuine reasons, various reasons why people will go and cluster there, getting to the end of the deadline. And there could be so many reasons why. And I know. For example, look at the dynamics of living conditions in Accra. There are about 1 million people living in Kaswa who work in Accra every day. Okay, they wake up at dawn in order to beat the traffic, in order to get traffic, so as to get to the office by 8 a.m. And yet, you expect such a person, when will he come to register? At Kaswa or in Accra? And when? So, you see, such a person may say, oh, let me wait for some time before going to register, or for whatever reason. I don't think anybody will deliberately say, let me wait 2 days to the registration, let me go and queue. I don't think so. But you see, for this being said, you cannot lump all of us together and say that we have not registered, so you are going to punish us, you are going to cut our lines, you are going to do this. You cannot lump all of us together, because not all of us have the same reason why we have not registered. We have different reasons. So this issue of blocking people, the government should take a second look at it and rather extend the time. You hear somebody say, even if the time is extended to 10 years, people will still do. Yes, it is true. But my point is this: we are having these challenges with people not registering just because we are doing two very important assignments at the same time, or we are doing them together. We are still registering people for the Ghana card. We are using the same Ghana card as a basis to register our SIM card. The two are going together. It's seriously problematic. Let us wait. For me, I would rather suggest, let us wait. Finish with the Ghana card process, or go to a certain stage where we would have registered 95 plus of Ghanaians, and then we can now do the SIM card registration. After that, we will now know that, okay, if at this point we put impunity measures, at least we've done well, we've tried.
But sir,
But running the two
has
processes together,
has that ship not sailed already, seeing that we are working with timelines and deadlines over the period? That ship is not sailed if we are going to say that we have to wait for the NIA to complete its exercise. Remember, the NIA has told us that they are doing a continuous registration exercise, and the EC has also had reason to tell them to try and mop up to complete the exercise. That ship has it not sailed already?
You see, that even buttresses my point. For the EC to come out to tell the NIA that, hey, finish early enough, that is a serious recipe for chaos or disaster awaiting us. We should take our time. The Ghana card is a serious game changer in the development agenda of the nation. But we should take our time and do it well, after which we can now use it as a foundation to do other important documentation.
There's a final question I would ask, and try and do that within some 2 minutes for me. And it's quite technical, but I need your mind, seeing that you're an IT person. So this data collection, this biometric data collection that we are being told is being done at the telcos, where a picture of your fingers are taken. For the last time I tried, it was only 4 fingers that were taken, and then a picture of my face was also taken. Is this biometric information which is being taken compared to what the NIA did and what the EC did, where our fingerprints were really put on some surfaces and the data was collected? Is this biometric information being collected?
I'm sorry, the line was breaking. You have to quickly
Okay, let me just ask the question
give
again.
me the question again. The
So-
line was breaking.
So I was asking that when you go to the telcos, they use a phone to take pictures of your fingerprint, and then that's supposed to be a means of collecting your biometric information. Now, can these phones capture that biometric information as they take the pictures, compared to what the EC did and the NIA did with our fingerprints on the machine?
You see, when we talk about capturing of data, the capturing the data and the one whose data are being captured, they must be together at the point of data capture. That is not negotiable. Okay, in IT terms, you have to be present for your biometric data to be captured for you. Like the accounts have a proverb,
Yeah.
you can't have a haircut without your presence. So yes, you must be present for that data to be captured. But my problem is with the duplication. The EC is capturing the same set of data, and I capturing the same set of data, telcos capturing our same set of biometric data. That can lead to some abuse somehow. So that's a bit problematic, and we need to have one set of comprehensive national database which we can access for various reasons to identify the people. That is the way to go.
All right.
A comprehensive set of the national database. Yeah.
Well, our time is fast spent. Viewers and our listeners in Tamale and Bolgatanga would have to forgive us for the technical hitches we experienced this evening at the onset of the show, but we're hoping that we'll sustain this conversation so people would have a better appreciation of the issues therein when it comes to the SIM card re-registration exercise. I'll thank my guest, Ras Mubarak, who joined me this morning, Mr. James Anan Amezi, who is Assistant Registrar, ICT, Central University, also joining us and sharing his thoughts with us. Would like to thank you as well as our viewer for being a part of our discussion tonight. There will be a repeat broadcast of this conversation, God willing, tomorrow. But again, we sincerely apologize for the little hitches when we started the conversation this evening. I wish you a pleasant evening on behalf of my team tonight.